There's a button in almost every car that you see every single day, but you've probably never really used it properly. A small circle with an arrow turning inside. Some people call it the AC button. Others press it only when something smells bad outside. But in reality, this little switch is much more important than you think. Because if you use it the wrong way, you'll not only burn more fuel, you could also cause serious damage to your AC system, and, over time, even to your engine. Short pause, beat drops. This is the story of the recirculation button. The button that could save you thousands of euros. If you know when to press it. The mistake almost everyone makes. I still remember my neighbor, Thomas. A meticulous guy. Always kept his car spotless. He had the recirculation button on all the time, 24 hours a day. He'd say, keeps the air clean and the cabin cool. Sounds logical, right? But after 2 summers, his air conditioning died. Diagnosis, compressor failure, and cost him 200 euros. And the crazy part? He did it to himself, simply because he thought he was doing the right thing. Tone shifts. Explanatory. The recirculation mode sounds like a good idea. Instead of constantly pulling in hot or dirty air from outside, the system just reuses the already cooled air inside. That means the AC doesn't have to work as hard to maintain temperature. And yes, short term, that saves energy and cools faster. But if you keep it on too long, the exact opposite happens. What really happens? When you hit recirculation, when you press that button, the system closes off outside air. The air you breathe just keeps looping through the cabin, the same air over and over. After 15 or 20 minutes, that air becomes full of moisture from breathing, sweating, wet shoes from the rain. That moisture settles inside the AC system, on the evaporator, in the ducts, in the filters. And that causes 2 big problems. First, the system becomes damp, perfect breeding ground for bacteria and mold. Second, the sensors and the compressor are forced to operate in this unnatural, humid environment. The compressor gets less airflow, overheats faster, and that's where those expensive failures begin. The psychological trap most drivers think, recirculation on awesome, better protection. After all, it makes sense. Keep the inside clean, block the dirty air outside, but your car isn't airtight. After half an hour of recirculation, CO2 levels inside the cabin rise significantly. You start getting tired, slower to react, your brain gets less oxygen. On long drives, that's a real safety risk. A DECRA test showed that after 45 minutes with recirculation on, the CO2 concentration in a car rises above 3,000 ppm, nearly 3 times the recommended indoor limit. That means less oxygen for your brain, you feel drowsy, lose focus, and might drive more dangerously without realizing it. The hidden damage, if you keep recirculation on permanently, condensation builds up on the AC's cooling fins. It stops draining properly, collects in the ducts, and soon your car starts to smell musty. That familiar AC odor? That's where it comes from. Sometimes it gets worse. The trapped moisture seeps into sensors, motors, and foam seals. Those components can slowly corrode and fail. If you're unlucky, the evaporator starts to corrode too. A component buried deep behind your dashboard. And if that goes bad, you'll need to tear half the front of your car apart. Cost? Between 1,000 and 2,000 euros, all because you left the wrong button on too long. When recirculation actually makes sense. So, should you never press it again? Of course not. You just have to use it right. Recirculation mode is great for short-term use. For example, when you get into a boiling hot car in summer and want to cool it quickly, or when you're stuck in a tunnel or behind a truck belching black smoke. Then, turn on recirculation, block the outside air, crank up the AC, and after 5 to 10 minutes, turn it back off. That way your system stays dry, the climate stays stable, and your compressor will thank you. Calmer voice, reflective tone. Many modern cars already do this automatically. They detect bad air and switch to recirculation temporarily. But older cars, and a lot of Asian models, don't. So it's up to you, and that's the crazy part. This tiny button you've probably never paid attention to actually determines the long-term health of your AC and your wallet. Beat changes, camera zooms on the symbol. In part 2, we'll look at what really happens inside your car's AC system when you press that button. Why moisture, mold, and energy loss are so closely connected, and how to use it properly to protect your car for years. Pause. Soft engine sound fades in. So, if you want to know why that little arrow on your dashboard might just be the most expensive button in your car, stick around. Now, let's dive deeper into what's actually happening inside your car's AC system when you press it, and why that tiny air loop affects not just your comfort, but your engine, your compressor, and even your health. What happens inside? When you activate recirculation, the entire airflow in your car changes. The vents close off outside air, and the fans start pulling in cabin air instead. That air passes through the cabin filter, gets cooled at the evaporator, and is then blown back into the cabin, again and again. At first, it's brilliant. The compressor works less because the air is already cool. The cabin cools down faster. Everything feels great. But after about 20 minutes, something invisible starts happening. The water vapor you exhale begins to condense inside the system. Tiny droplets cling to the cooling fins, collect over time, and when they stop draining properly, they create moist, dusty pockets. And that's exactly where mold starts to grow. Pause. More serious tone. And you can smell it eventually. That wet sock odor when you turn on the AC, that's not coming from outside. It's coming from inside, from the heart of your system. Why it damages the compressor? Compressor works like a little pump. It compresses refrigerant so it can cool and absorb heat. But with recirculation always on, the compressor gets little fresh air. It runs in a kind of overheating loop. Result, the oil inside the compressor breaks down faster. Lubrication weakens, seals start to leak, refrigerant escapes, and eventually the system runs dry. When that happens, it's game over. A new compressor easily costs over €1,000, plus labor. The sad thing? Most people don't notice until it's too late. When the AC suddenly only blows lukewarm air and the car starts to smell, the damage is already done. Moisture, corrosion, and electronics, but it's not just the compressor. The trapped moisture travels through the entire ventilation system. It settles on sensors, connectors, and small actuators. These parts aren't designed to handle constant humidity. Even a tiny drop can corrode a circuit board, and suddenly the flap control stops working. And then what happens? The system can't switch between outside and inside air anymore. The flap gets stuck, usually in the recirculation position, and the whole cycle starts all over again. A mechanic friend once told me they see dozens of such cases every year. Customers say, "It's been smelling weird for weeks, and now hardly any air comes out." And in the end, it's just a rusted actuator, a €30 part that costs €400 to replace. When you should use it all right. Enough horror stories. So, how do you actually use the button the right way? Simple. Recirculation isn't a permanent mode, it's a tool. You activate it when you want to achieve something short-term. For example, you get into your car on a blazing hot day. It's 40 degrees C inside. Windows closed, AC set to LO, recirculation on. After 5 minutes, once it's cool, turn it off again. Or when you're stuck behind a smoking truck in traffic, recirculation on for a few minutes. Breathe easier, then back to normal once the air clears. In winter, though recirculation can actually be dangerous, because moisture can't escape, your windows fog up from the inside. Not just annoying, it's unsafe. Slight chuckle. Sure, modern cars have sensors to manage all that automatically. But let's be honest, how often do those systems really know what you need? Sometimes, one quick press of a button is still the smarter move. And maintenance tips, if you want to keep your AC system healthy, here's a simple trick. Turn off the AC about 5 minutes before you park, but leave the fan running. That way, the evaporator dries out before the engine stops. Less moisture, less mold. Also, change your cabin air filter regularly, at least once a year, ideally spring and autumn. A dirty filter blocks airflow and makes moisture problems worse, and if your car already smells musty in summer, get your AC professionally disinfected. It takes about 20 minutes and costs less than a full tank of fuel, but it could save you hundreds in future repairs.